I made a video just recently about how to get out of a depression, get out of a depressed state, and I realized that video is kind of at a surface level. And so in this video, I'm going to go deeper into what's behind it and what to do with it. Now, the video that I made is very good, and if you check that out, like it's some very quick practical tips that will help you get out of a depressed state and into a better feeling and more productive state fast. But in this video, I'm going to go more deep into what I believe is behind it. Now, just full disclosure, I'm not a psychologist, I'm not a psychiatrist, I don't have any kind of special qualifications for this, which on one hand, you could see as a bad thing because I don't know all the science, I don't know all the research behind it, I haven't studied it to the depth that these people have. But on the other hand, it also means that I'm free to tell you what I actually believe. Whereas if I was a licensed psychologist, well, now I'm in a perpetual state of fear. I cannot express myself openly because then I have to be afraid of somebody pulling my license, right? If I get called a quack or whatever, then there's some licensing board that will pull my license. And this happens all the time. That's why professionals in the various different industries are so like myopic. They just cannot even consider anything that's outside of the mainstream, is because of licensing. And chances are that's why the licensing exists in the first place, is exactly to keep all those people in line. And so they say that, well, everybody who doesn't have a license, they don't have any credibility. The only people that have a credibility are the ones that have a license, and the people that have the license are the ones that are unable to truly express themselves because they have to worry about maintaining their license. Okay, so with that out of the way, and I'll give you another disclaimer too before we get started, and that is that there may be many different causes or many different contributing factors to a state of depression, and it certainly seems like there are. So I am not going to cover all of them, and it may be that what I cover here is not your case, is not applicable to you. So keep that in mind, but there's no harm in trying it. There's no harm in considering it, and it may just solve your problem. It may not, but it might. It's worth a try. So here's the part that I did not get to, and that is the spiritual side, that ultimately depression is something that is spiritual. Now, it's very kind of difficult to conceptualize this for us, because what we are as human beings, as incarnate human beings, is we are a spirit inside of a body. And so we have a mind that is spiritual, and we have a brain that is physical, and the two interact. And so you have your spiritual mind that interacts with your physical brain, and a problem in that interaction can come from either side. It can come from the spiritual side, or it can come from the physical side, and the two affect each other, right? If your physical body is not doing so well, that's going to affect your state of mind. That's going to affect you spiritually for most people. Now, if you're really, really like a spiritually enlightened person, then perhaps you've transcended that. But for most of us, anything going wrong in our physical body is going to have spiritual consequences. And then, of course, the same is true in reverse. Anything that is going wrong spiritually is going to have physical consequences. So when they say that, depression is just a chemical imbalance in the brain, it's like, okay, maybe that's true, or maybe the chemical imbalance in the brain is the effect of the depression rather than the cause. Maybe the cause is something spiritual, and the spiritual depression is causing a difference in the brain chemistry, which is entirely possible. And mainstream science has proven that the mind can effectively shape the brain. The concept called neuroplasticity. What you think about will actually change the physical structure of the brain. So it can work either way. So that said, depression can and often is, and perhaps always is, I don't know, but at least often is, spiritual, and it can come from a spiritual attack, that a spiritual entity can decide to target you and essentially suck away your spiritual energy, because ultimately that's what depression is, right? It's just a lack of spiritual energy. So you just want to sit around and eat Cheetos and watch TV, and like, you can't bring yourself to do anything. It's a lack of energy. And it's not a matter of, it's not a lack of calories. Like, you're getting plenty of calories from the Cheetos. It may not be a lack of sleep. You might have had perfectly good sleep the night before, right? It's a spiritual energy that you feel in your physical body. Again, the spiritual affects the physical and vice versa. And so there's a book that I read. It was one of the Andre Luis series that is, if you've never checked that out, by the way, it's very interesting. I think it was called Liberation. I think it was that book. I may be wrong. It may have been one of the other ones, but I think it was Liberation, where a group of spirits decide that they are going to target a person and basically kill this person by robbing their spiritual energy until they're in such a state that they can't even like maintain their physical body anymore. And so these spiritual entities, which different religions have different names for them. The most common in the West is demons. We call them demons, although I think demons are misunderstood in that they're not exactly these entities that are just inherently evil. They're really just the same as you and I. They're humans that are no longer in their physical bodies, and they're the spirits of what we would have called bad people while they were alive. Now, nobody is inherently good or bad. We just choose to do good things or to do bad things, and for most of us, along with our life experience, we learn to be a little bit better and a little bit better over time. We evolve over time spiritually, and so these are lower evolved spirits that are motivated by anger and hatred and all the same motivations that are our lower motivations when we're unconscious of the, how do you say it? We're not motivated by the things we should be motivated. Like, we all understand this. Motivated by anger, by vengeance, by pride, etc. Well, there's a lot of spirits that are motivated in the same way. And so they will target somebody based on a variety of things. It could be some kind of grudge, like they're angry at you for something that you did. They could be that they're angry at somebody related to you. Like, if your parents did something to them, then they'll get back at your parents by doing something evil against you. It could be that they see what you're doing and see that you have some kind of mission in the world to make the world better, and they are not on board with that, and they would like to hinder you from that mission. Which, by the way, if you do have some kind of mission in the world and you are driven to do something that will make the world better, and I believe that all of us have something like that we should be doing, that we're here for a reason. So if you are on that path, then there are going to be spiritual forces that are not happy with that, and they're going to try to sabotage you. And one of the ways that they can sabotage you is by sucking away your spiritual energy. Okay, so what do you do about this? And by the way, if you read the book, I highly recommend it. I think it's Liberation. Even if it's not that one, that will still give you a very good idea of how it works. So, well, what do you do about this? Well, there's kind of two different parts to this. There's the spirits that you have around you, which you do have some control over, and you have your own personal defenses. So, like, we'll start with the first one. Like, let's say that it's like if you live in a place like in the inner city of Chicago, or I've never been there, but I've heard that the crime rate is horrible. So I'm just using that as an example. No offense to anybody that lives in Chicago. I may be completely wrong, but that's kind of the reputation. So if I live in the inner city of Chicago and I keep having my house broken into, well, part of the problem is where I am. It's the spirits that are around me. And then the other part of the problem is, like, let's say I don't lock my door, or I have a house that's easy to get into, I don't have an alarm system, well, then that's part of the problem too. So obviously I can't control what other people do, just like I can't control what lower spirits do, but I can choose my environment that I choose to live in, and I can I can put up defenses against them, right? And so it's kind of the same idea. So here, part of it actually is very similar in that, like, where you choose to live has an impact. Or where you choose to put yourself. Live is part of it, but where you go. I mean, if you are in a big city, there are absolutely more lower spirits there. And you can tell by the state of people that are in big cities. Like, people in big cities have much more mental problems and depression and drug abuse and crime, and like everything bad happens more in the big cities than in the less populated areas. So you can probably see around me, I don't live in the city. I used to, and then I moved out, partially because the spiritual energy is better here. I like it here. It's in nature. The spiritual energy is good, and the people that live among nature tend to be people with better energy. And so the spirits that live that tend to populate those areas are the same. And I could go off on a tangent about like how spirits are related to location, but lower spirits are living in a situation that is often somewhat similar to when they were incarnate, when they had physical bodies. And again, like, read the Andre Luis books, read the Allan Kardec books if you want to know about the peculiarities of how that works. Which, by the way, this used to be scientifically studied, right? These were scientists that studied the action of spirits. Now, it's really unfortunate that in modern days, this has been expelled from science, because there is a science to it. There is a science to the way that spirits operate and the way that spirits interact with incarnate human beings and interact with physical nature, right? Most of us realize that spirits exist. Most of us are not atheist materialists. We realize that spirits exist, and that if you believe that you have a soul and a body, well, there must be some way that your soul is interacting with that body. So there's some science to the way that a spiritual soul interacts with a physical body. There is an interaction between the spiritual and the physical, and that is within the realm of science, even if it's science that's not very well accepted. Now, it used to be much better accepted than it is now, and something interesting I've found is that there's a lot of science that's been kind of thrown to the wayside that was actually good science. You know, we kind of have this expectation or this assumption that modern science is better than ancient science, that science is continually progressing and getting better in all ways with no exceptions. Now, that is true in some ways. I mean, in some ways, clearly science is progressing. You can see that by the progression of technology that is much more advanced now than it was just 100 years ago. But on the other hand, it's also, there's a lot of focus of scientific study in the past that has been dropped. And I believe that they were actually onto something, but it's been dropped because the people that were funding it have changed their priorities. We think of science as something that's objective and it's just, we're just following the truth and all this, but in reality, it doesn't work that way. In reality, science costs money. If you want to study something, it costs time, it costs energy, and it costs money. And if you are going to spend your time, energy, and money, you better have some sort of purpose that is going to motivate you to do that. And so it's usually either governments or corporations that are spending the time, energy, and money, or at least spending the money to buy the scientists' time and energy in order to study what they want to study. And so obviously they get to choose what gets studied and what gets pushed to the wayside. So I think anybody who is an honest searcher after truth will find some very interesting things in scientific fields of study in the past that are no longer being studied, at least by the mainstream scientific establishment anymore. So, back to the point, though, is you change your location where you the energy of the place that you are. And part of this is you can just feel it, right? You can feel when you go into somewhere that has good energy versus somewhere that has bad energy. Think about going to a dive bar with a bunch of drunk people versus going into a beautiful cathedral. You can feel the difference in the energy. And so, not surprisingly, lower spirits are attracted to places with lower energy, and higher spirits are attracted to places with higher energy, which you may also notice with people, right? If you go to a place where there's a bunch of drunks and a bunch of drug addicts, well, that is attractive to lower spirits, whether incarnate or disincarnate. So when I say lower spirits, you and I are spirits. If we're attracted to places with a bunch of drunkenness and drug use, well, that's our spirit being attracted to that place. Well, you need not have a body for the same thing to be true. You have disincarnate spirits, lower spirits that are attracted to that kind of place. And the same is, the opposite is true, right? You know, the drug addicts and the drunkards, you don't really find going to the nature parks. You don't find in the cathedrals. I mean, unless they are trying to get out of their situation, which again, I'm not saying anybody is inherently evil. Like, everybody has that opportunity to realize that this sucks. I don't want to be stuck in this lower energy. I want to get into a better place. And so those people might go to the cathedral or the nature park or whatever because they are looking to change. They're looking to get into a better situation. But generally speaking, the low energy attracts low spirits. High energy attracts high spirits. So if you will put yourself in an environment of high energy, then you'll attract better spirits, and you will be less prone to depression. And the same, there's ways that you can do that, even if you live in a bad place. Like, even if you live in a place with bad energy, chances are there's a place that you could go that's close by that has good energy. So I notice, for example, if I'm in my house and I'm feeling bad, if I'm feeling depressed, just going outside makes me feel better. Just going into nature, which I'm blessed that it's very close to me, but even if it's not close to you, even if you have to get in the car and drive 10 minutes or take a bus, you know, it's probably worth it. There's somewhere nearby that has better energy than the place that you are right now. So you can change your environment. And then the second thing that you can do is to fortify yourself, to increase your defenses. And there's a few ways to do that. And it's kind of related, actually, because just like I said, the lower spirits are attracted to lower energy environments. Well, they're also they have more access to lower energy individuals. And so if you will raise your personal energy, irrespective of the energy that's around you, although it's easier if you have good energy around you, of course, but if you will raise your personal energy, then you will be less accessible to lower spirits that would like to bother you. So how do you do that? Well, the main thing that you do is discipline your thoughts. The Bible says I'm going to butcher this, but like, everything that is admirable and everything that is good and everything that is righteous and everything that is positive, something like that, think on those things. And that's exactly how you do it, right? If you keep your thoughts positive, then you are essentially off limits. Like, you're on a different wavelength than the spirits that would seek to bring you down. And so the more that, whenever there's two parts to this. One is like intentionally thinking about good things, thinking about what you're grateful for, thinking about people that you love, think about go somewhere beautiful and think about how nice the surroundings are, etc. That's one way to do it. And the other way is obviously the inverse of that, is to don't think about things, or stop thinking about things that are bringing you down. So if you're thinking about somebody that wronged you, if you're thinking about something that you're angry about, if you're thinking about something terrible that could possibly happen in the future that you're afraid of, if you're thinking about how bad the government is, or how bad your mother-in-law is, or how bad, fill in the blanks. And by the way, I'm not saying those things aren't true. Maybe the government is terrible. Maybe your mother-in-law is terrible. Like, it's it doesn't matter. If you are thinking about those things, then you are bringing that negative energy to you, and if you are bringing that negative energy, you are opening the doors for lower spirits that can manipulate you and further steal your energy and make you depressed. So if you will try that, do the things that I mentioned in the previous video, which, if you go to my channel, it should be the video that I released right before this one. I'm not sure when the time frame is exactly, because I released them kind of sporadically. But the one that was released right before this one, and that'll give you just some practical steps to take. And then this is kind of a more holistic, like this is longer term over your life in general. Like the more that ratio changes of good thoughts to bad thoughts, the more off limits you're going to be. Like the more secure your house is against these lower spirits that are going to seek to bring you down. And then, of course, you can move your location, move your environment as much as you can. And that means where you live, but that's not something you can probably change overnight, right? But it's something that you can look into in the future. But also the places that you go, the people that you hang out with, the people that you associate with, etc. You can change. You have a lot of control over your environment without changing where you live. Also, something that helps significantly is just to clean up. If you live in a place that's cluttered or is dirty, clean it up. That'll help. That will help create a better spiritual environment for you. So give that a try, and as always, I would love to hear your results, either positive or negative, in the comments. And if you found this helpful, then subscribe to the channel, hit the like button, and I'll see you in the next one.